I'm hoping that you have a good grasp of explicit instruction as a framework for learning. There is a visual on the slide previous to this one that when you first look at it might be a little overwhelming, but is a great way to represent explicit instruction as a framework and as a structure so that our students who have barriers to learning, have diverse learning abilities, or learning a new skill, or learning something that's very difficult, you can explicitly teach them while they're understanding and communicating the learning also through a new skill. While it looks complicated and it has a lot of steps to it, it's important to also realize that it fits naturally into some of the things that we already do as instructors. And as an example, explicit instruction matches universal design for learning. When we're talking about the ways that specifically teaching students skills, whether it be a small group or a whole group, matches the frameworks that we do for all students. I'd like to make sure that you've at least taken a look at the article that is also part of our required learning for this week that really takes a look at, it's cited on this slide, that really takes a look at the way explicit instruction fits inside of UDL. I have copied and included the visual for that on the next slide, and you might want to pull that up in a separate window and take a look at that as I talk through this. But I think it would also be important to make sure you look at the definitions of both explicit instruction and universal design for learning as a review on page 2 of this article. I also wrote down a quote that I thought was really important, the way it ties them together, and when it comes to what we ask teachers, especially general education teachers, to do. I'm going to read and then discuss. On page 2, after it defines both frameworks, it states, "This is how educators might jointly leverage key instructional methodologies to render their instruction accessible to the broadest range of stakeholders and in the most impactful manner possible." So taking universal design for learning and teaching explicitly within that, planning your instruction that way, makes, while the front loading of the work might be a little bit more difficult, it makes it easier in the long run because you make sure that you're able to meet the diverse needs of your classroom, which includes students with disabilities, but includes all of our diverse learners. Please make sure you take a look at pages 4 through 7 of this article. You might even have 2 tabs open and have chapter 2 open and this article open, because both of the resources have excellent examples of lessons in which explicit instruction is used and in which it's also used with UDL. I feel like this article speaks to our teachers of older students a little bit better. It's not quite as simplistic and really addresses some complex skills when using both UDL and explicit instruction. As you get a chance, flip to the next slide and start looking at the visual. It's very simple. It takes the 3 parts, the opening, the body, and the closing of an explicit instruction plan, and talks about the parts within those and matches them to universal design for learning. I want to point out that 3 of the universal design for learning and explicit instructions match almost perfectly. When we talk about stating the goal, UDL has a matching checkpoint. I think it's 8.1. When we talk about making sure you discuss the relevance of the skill that you're learning, UDL 7.2 talks about optimizing relevance, value, and authenticity. It's an exact match. And when we talk about checking for understanding in an explicit instruction lesson, UDL 8.4, increase mastery-oriented feedback, checking for understanding, making sure you're getting the information and communicating with the students. And also UDL 6.3, facilitate managing information and resources. That one's not quite an exact match, but those are 3 areas of explicit learning and UDL that fit perfectly together, almost like a puzzle piece. The others, I'd like you to imagine the visual on the next slide as a lesson plan of sorts. Imagine how powerful your planning could be for the learning for all of your students if you were able to use this simple visual as a way to organize instruction and do your lesson planning by really taking advantage of these two high leverage practices. If explicit instruction is new to you, this article is a lot, and it might take a couple of read-throughs, or maybe even saving it onto your drive and saving it for later when you have some time to really dig in deeply. So I encourage you to skim this article if explicit instruction is new to you. But if you're already doing some of these things and you zipped through chapter 2 from this book, this article is where you need to take a deep dive and maybe take it to the next level.